Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. Today we're going to look at a different kind of equation, linear equations. You may have heard the terms quadratic equations and other kind of equations. Today we're going to look at linear equations, which is basically equations of lines. Before I go any further, I want to introduce myself. My first name is Miriam. I'm here with Penn since 2015, and I'm so happy today to be with you in this live webinar. Just to remind you, you are able to ask your questions throughout the webinar if you have any by typing your questions in the questions box that you see on your panel. At the end of the webinar, if you have any general questions, I'll be happy to help you with that as well. Today we're going to look at some objectives for this lesson that I thought is main in our lesson. And basically they are centered around the slope-intercept form of a linear equations. We will look at how can we categorize a line based on its slope, how to be given a graph and you write the equation from that, how if you have an equation, how can you graph the line, and so on. We're going to go over the slope-intercept form in more depth today. And as I said, if you have any questions, you're able to post them, and I'm sure your questions will enrich today's webinar. To begin with, we know that a linear equation or a straight line has a slope, and the slope determines how steep the line is. So in math or in algebra or with functions, there is a way that you are able to calculate the slope of a line. If you know 2 points that are lying on this line, you are able then to use a formula that is given to you. We are not expected to come up with formulas, we just expected to use the formulas properly. So if you know 2 points that are lying on the line, you're able to use the coordinates of these points in the formula that you see in the screen to calculate the slope of the line. So for example, if you have a graph of a line, or you're just given 2 lines and you are told that those 2 points, you're given 2 points and you're told that these 2 points lie on that line, and you're asked to calculate the slope. How would you do that? Well, you just use the formula that is given within the lesson. So the formula basically asks you to subtract the y coordinates of the 2 points given to you either in the question or in the graph, and then divide it over the difference in the x coordinates of these 2 same points. For example, what is the slope of the line that passes through 1 and -4 and 5 and 6? If the question says passes through these 2 points, that means that the 2 points are on that line. So I'm able to use the points to calculate and give a numerical value of the slope of this line. So m, the slope, equals to, I personally like to rewrite the formula every time I have to use it. If you think that is a good practice for you to each time write down the formula on your paper so you do not get confused, do so. Equals to. Now, I need to determine what's y2, what's y1, what's x2, and what's x1. Basically, these coordinates x2 and y2 comes from the second point, y1 and x1 comes from the first point. The easiest way to use the formula is to label your coordinates. So this is the first point, then label them. That's x1 and y1. We know with an ordered pair that comes from the coordinate plane, the x coordinate appears first and then the y coordinate. And since this is the first point, I'm going to label that x1 and y1. The second point have an x2 and y2. Labeling the coordinate like that, I am able just to plug in the values in place of these variables I have in my formula. So y2 is 6 minus y1 is -4. Note that the formula itself has a minus sign, and then the y1 itself too has a negative sign. So these has to be both on the formula. Now x2, 5, minus x1, which is 1. And from here, we just do the simple math. 6 minus -4 is the same as saying 6 plus 4. And then 5 minus 1. Evaluate 6 and 4 is 10 on the top. 5 minus 1, of course, is a 4. We're able to simplify the fraction more because these two numbers are even numbers. And you know that 2 is a common factor that we have to eliminate to simplify the fraction. 10 over 2 is 5. 4 over 2 is 2. The slope of the line is 5 over 2. And it is okay to have a fraction as a slope of a line. You can have a negative fraction, like a -half, to be a slope. That's fine. If this is your answer and you do your work correctly, and it happens to be a negative fraction or a positive fraction or a whole number, that is okay. Now, you may have a question saying, well, what happens if I decided to make this point the first point and that point the second point? Can we do that? And the answer is yes. If you decided to consider this point as the first and this one is the second, that's fine. Just label them x1, y1, and x2 and y2. So whatever order you are doing your top of the formula, you have to keep in the bottom of the formula. That's it. So this is how we calculate the slope. Any questions on this formula and how we use it? Okay, if you just joined us and it's your first time here in our live webinars, you're able to ask your questions by typing in the questions on the questions box, and I'll be checking them when I have the chance to and answer your relevant questions. Now let's go to another concept regarding the slope. There are different kinds of slopes. When you use the formula that we just talked about, you may happen to get a positive slope, a negative slope, a 0 for the slope, and sometimes you cannot calculate the slope. And at that case, we call it an undefined slope. Undefined slope because you cannot do the math. And we will see an example on that. So if you have a positive slope, it tells you something about the line. The line, if it has a positive slope, it means it goes to upwards whenever you go from the left to the right on the x-axis. That means that whenever the x values increase, the y values also increase. This line has a slope of a positive 2. If the line has a negative slope, whether it's a negative whole number or a negative fraction, it has to be a negative slope. And if this is the case with your line, then your line will point downwards. If you go from left to right, as the values of the x-axis increase, the values of the y-axis go the opposite, decrease. And this is when you realize, even if you do not calculate the slope, that this line, from the looks of it, it has a negative slope. What happens if the line does not have any kind of steepness? It's just horizontal, it's parallel to the x-axis. Then we say that this line has 0 slope. The slope of that line will have the same as the slope of the x-axis itself, and that's why the horizontal lines are parallel to the x-axis. So whenever you have a slope of a 0, even if you don't look at the graph of the line, you know in your mind that this line has to be a horizontal line. What if the line is a vertical line? In this case, the line has undefined slope. We cannot calculate the slope for a vertical line. And why? Just to give you a reason for that. Now, we just went through the formula for the slope. of a line, how to calculate that if you know 2 points on the line. Since we have the graph of the vertical line, let's pick any 2 points on that line, try to calculate the slope and see if we come up with an answer or no. So let's pick -5 and 4. So that's -5 and -4. -5 and -4, that's a point on the line, easy to point at because you are able to see the grids intersecting on that line. So I'm going to pick that line, point as a random point for me to test with. The second one I'm going to decide to do is a -5 and 2. So that is another one. So again, the coordinates on that first point is -5 and -4. The second point has a -5 and 2. Let's use the formula. M equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Let's make the this one to be the second point, for example. That's x2, y2. And therefore, this is the first point, x1 and y1. Let's use the formula. Y2, which is going to be 2, minus y1, which is -4, over the difference in x-axis, or on the x coordinates, I should say. So we're going to do x2, -5, minus -5. Well, -5 plus 5 is a 0, and we cannot divide over 0. And that's why the slope of a vertical line is not defined. You cannot have a specific number for that. So from here, we just concluded that with the type of the slope, we're able to give some kind of a description to the line, if it goes upward, downward, horizontal, or vertical. And I think up to this slide, everything's straightforward unless you have a question. And if you have a question on the slope so far, you can go ahead and ask your question on the questions box. Okay, let's do a self-check if it's your first time here in the webinar. Throughout the webinar, we give practice questions to you so you're able to check on your understanding for each topic that we go through. So this is one of them. Here's the question. The line that passes through the points -2 and 2 and -3 and 6 is what? So you have 2 points, and we just learned that the slope will give you some kind of a description of the line even if you don't graph the line. What would you do to pick the right description of that line? Is it vertical, horizontal, goes up, or goes down? Take your time. I will change the screen to give you the same question, but you're able to then choose your answer and submit it. Okay, I'm going to change my screen to give you the same question. Here you go. Write down the formula for the slope. Try to label your coordinates. And from there, you're able to decide what the slope is. And from the value of the slope, you can decide what kind of a line it is. Okay. I'm just going to wait for a few seconds for everyone to get the chance to participate in that question. If you're watching this webinar again later on recorded, I recommend that you pause the video on those self-check questions, do the questions again, and then play the video to see why or what is the answer and why we decided it is the right answer. Okay, let's do the question together so everyone is sure about their answer. Again, I'm going to think about the slope, the formula for the slope. I still, after dealing with math for many years, I personally like to write down the formula. If you're still a beginner to learn algebra, I strongly recommend that you would write down the formula as well, y2 minus y1 on the top, and then the difference in the x values. Let's label the points so we do not get confused. You can consider the first one that appears as 0.1 and then the second is 0.2, or the other way around. I just go by the order, x1 and y1, x2 and y2. Basically just plug in the values then. Y2 is 6, then 6 minus 2 over the x's. X2 is -3 minus -2. Do the math. 6 minus 2 is 4. -3 minus -2 is the same as -3 plus 2, which will give you -1. Then your answer is basically -4. The slope is negative. That means that as the x values increase, the y values will decrease. That means that the line will go downward. Any questions? Anything that was not clear? Okay, let's go on to involve graphs in our study here. So what's the slope of the line in the graph? You're given a graph, the graph of a linear equation or a linear function or a line. They mean the same thing. What would be the slope of that given line? I want to show you two methods. The one is the traditional method one, which is again using the slope formula y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And there is another way to find the slope from the graph. So again, we need 2 points since the formula asks for 2 points. So from a graph, I'm going to use the easiest points I'm going to be able to find in my graph. One of the easiest points I personally like to use, if it's available, is the y-intercept. The y-intercept point is the point where the line intersects with the y-axis. So the line intersects with the y-axis at this point. I'm going to use it just because the number 0, the 0 would be one of the coordinates in that point. The number 0 is easy to work with. So the coordinate of this point is 0 and -3. And choose another point. We need 2 points. Any other point that is on the line. Let's pick this point, for example, and write down the coordinates. They are -3 and -1. Now I have my both coordinates. I'm able then to go ahead and label them and use the formula right away. I'm just going to go from left to right. I'm going to call this x1 and y1, x2, y2. You can choose to do the opposite. It's up to you. Write down the formula, m, or the slope, equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1 equals 2. Simply plug in the numbers. Then we have a -3 minus -1 over x2 is 0 minus -3. Let's evaluate the top and the bottom. -3 minus -1 is really the same as -3 plus 1. So that's the same as -3 plus 1. On the bottom, 0 minus -3 is the same as 0 plus 3. Equals to -3 plus 1 is a -2 on the top. 0 plus any number is the same. So it is 3. The slope is -2/3. And if you look at the graph, it makes sense because the line goes downward. If you calculated the slope of a graphed line and you have a positive slope, but the line is going downward, you need to go back and recalculate your work because that is an indication you did something wrong. But at this point, everything makes sense. That is the first method. Traditional method, nothing wrong with it. There's another faster method that I happen to know. So, and it's really easy, uses the graph itself, no formulas. And the method is basically, I'm going to trace from one point to the other, and I'm going to know what would be the rise and the run that is necessarily to move from one point on the line to the other point. I'm going to use the same points, the ones I have labeled in green. I'm going to stay with them. You can choose any other points. You will come up with the same answer. So what I mean by the rise and the run is how many vertical units and horizontal units I need to walk or do in order to get from this point to this point. So the vertical units we just call the rise, and the run would be the horizontal units. So it takes 1, 2 units going down, that's the rise. So the rise is 2 units down. And since we are going down, our number for the rise is not a 2, it's a -2. The run is the horizontal units to be able to land on that second point. Let's do that. So we have 1, 2, 3. It takes 3 horizontal units to the right of the graph to go to the second point. Since it's the right, not the left, I'm going to keep it as 3. Now, since the slope is rise over run, I know the rise is -2. I know the run is 3. This is the slope. That's it. So to make it more clear, regarding the rise, if you go up, your number will be a positive. If you go down, like our case here, it has to be a negative rise. With the horizontal units or the run, if you go to the right, like we did with the 3 here, it's a positive. If you happen to go to the left, then it has to be a negative run. You just put them on fractions, and if you have to simplify, you can. If not, like our case here, then that would be your final answer. This is the slope. This is a second method. You can use a second method to check your first method. If you'd like to go to with the traditional way, and you want to just make sure that you have the right slope, you can just do that second method just to make sure that you have the right slope there. Any questions? Anything that was not clear? Okay. Self-check question. The slope of the linear function, the same as when I say the line or the linear equation. Maybe the terminology may be sometime overwhelming to us if we are still beginning to learn algebra, but these terms really mean the same, means line. So what is the slope of that given line? You have the graph. What would be the slope of this line? Take your time. I'm not gonna hide the screen here because my other screen will not show the graph. So I'm gonna keep that for a good time until you decide on 2 points on that line. You can either use the traditional method or the second method that we went through. And then at the end, I'm just gonna show up the question on the other screen just for you to submit your answers. Pick any 2 points on the line. One of the easiest points I see is here. It's up to you if you want to use it or no, but I would use this point since it's available on the graph. And this is 0 and -2. You can choose another second point. For me, I did choose for this problem. I'm just giving you what I did choose. You can choose whatever you want. And at the end, our calculations should be the same. So I used 7 and 2. I'm going to leave you finish up the calculations. Okay, I'm going to show you the question again, and I'll be appreciating if you submit your answers. Here you go. What is the slope of that line that we had on screen? 4/7, 3/5, -4/7, -1/4. Was it a line going upward or downward? Can you eliminate some answers and definitely say this line cannot have that slope because so and so? Just gonna wait for you a few seconds for everyone to get a chance to participate with us. The 2 points, if you had you wanted the screen to stay longer, the 2 points I chose and you can use as well is 0 and -2, and the second point was 7 and 2. Okay, let's go over the question together. Again, the traditional method is that you use the formula m, the slope equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Label your coordinates. I just consider that to be first point. This is a y1 and this is x2, y2. Plug in the numbers in the formula and then subtract top and bottom. So y2 is 2. And then you have minus -2. And then on the bottom, x2 is 7 minus 0. 2 minus -2 is the same as 2 plus 2, which is 4. 7 minus nothing is itself 7. The slope is 4/7. It's a positive slope, and it makes sense because the graph of the line goes up as we go from left to right on the x-axis. So it goes upwards, and it makes sense. If you are taking or you are preparing your students or you yourself taking the SAT exams or ACTs and you have to be wise with time, I would right away eliminate those 2 answers because again the line goes up, not down. Any questions? Anything that was not clear so far? Okay, let's then go to the equation itself. So this webinar was all about the slope-intercept form of a linear equation, but we had to go through the slope and know a little bit about the y-intercept point because really the equation is all about that. If you know the slope of the line, which is m, and you know where the line intersects the y-axis, then you can simply put together the equation y, which is a variable, equals to the slope that you calculate through the slope form or the slope formula, or through tracing from one point to another as we said in method 2, and then x would be a variable plus b would be from the graph or however you will know which point the line intersects the y-axis, that would be the y-coordinate of that point. So the point where this line intersects the y-axis is 0 and b. Take that b and put it in the formula, take that slope and put it there, put an y and an x, and that's it. It is so easy to be true. So, but this is the way that we really write out the equation. Let's practice more so we know what we are doing with this kind of equation. Later on, you will be introduced to other types of equations, a slope point form of a line, and so on. Today, we're going to focus on that one kind of equation, the slope-intercept form. Now, this equation of the line y equals to -1/3x plus 5. If you are given this equation and you are asked, what's the slope of this line? No graph is provided, nothing else, just the equation. Would you be able to say, oh, the slope is -1/3, that's m. And why is that? Because this equation follows the form of the equation y equals to mx plus b, where m is the slope, which is really that number in front of the x, and b is the 5. That's it. Really easy. Now, if I ask you another question, where that line intersects the y-axis, no graphs, nothing given except that one equation, you will say, oh, this equation is on the form, the slope-intercept form, then that 5 must be the b. So the point is 0 and 5. That's it. I did not use anything except the equation. Any questions on this part? Okay, let's look at a more advanced kind of a question here. What is the slope and the y-intercept point of the line? And this is the equation, 5x plus 4y equals to 8. I cannot say, oh, the number in front of the x is 5, then the slope is 5. That is incorrect. In order to find the slope from an equation without graphing, you need to rearrange this equation to be in the y equals to mx plus b, which is the slope-intercept form, meaning that you have to rearrange this given equation. So you have y isolated on one side equals a number and then times x plus a number. And then you'll be able to say, oh, the slope is that number. Oh, this is the y-intercept then. Let's do that just using the algebra steps that we used to. So the first goal that we have is to isolate the y by itself. I see the 4y is added to 5x. Then eliminate the 5x by subtracting 5x from both sides. 5x minus itself is gone. Now I have 4y by itself in one side equals to negative 5x plus 8. I cannot combine the 8 and the negative 5 because they are unlike terms. We cannot combine them unless the 8 had an x, then we can combine. But as you see, there's no x with the 8. Then they have to be two separate terms. Negative 5x plus 8 on the right-hand side, and we have 4y on the left-hand side. We're so close to isolating the y by itself on the left-hand side, but we have a 4. The 4 is multiplied times y. What should we do? What is the inverse operation of multiplication that we can use to get rid of the 4? Division. Divide over 4. Divide the whole side there over 4. The whole right-hand side have to be divided over 4. Not only the 5 or the negative 5, not only the 8, but everything has to be divided over 4 to keep our equation balanced. 4 over 4 is a 1. Now we have the y isolated in one side. Negative 5 over 4 is a negative 5 over 4, x. Plus 8 over 4 is what? 2. Now look at the equation that we have. Isn't that corresponds to the general form for the slope-intercept form of a linear equation? Yes, we have y separated, we have a number in front of the x, and then we have either a plus or minus sign, and then we have a number at the end. This is the slope-intercept form. From this equation, if I'm asked to find the slope, then the slope is right away -5/4. This is a line that goes downwards as the x values increases. Where does the line intersect with the y-axis? Really easy. This number, put a 0 and 2, and this is the point of intersection, and we call it the y-intercept point. That's it. Questions on this problem? Okay, let's move on. Question for you to do. The slope and the y-intercept of the line, and you're given the equation 12x plus 8y equals to 48 are what? What's the slope and what's b, or the y-intercept? Can we identify those from the given equation, or we have to do something before we decide what's the slope and what's the y-intercept? Take your time, write down the equation. I want to remind you of the slope-intercept form y equals to mx plus b. Our goal is to change this equation to this form. What should you do to do that? Take your time, and then I'm going to change my screen later on. When you do the steps to isolate the y, you need to ask yourself before you write down your steps, why am I adding 12x? Why am I subtracting 12x? If you don't have a reason, if you were not able to find the rule that goes with your step that you're intending to do, then you need to stop and think about why, or how should I do that? And you have to have a good basis to your step that you're trying to do. Okay, I'm gonna show the question again, and here you go. What is the slope of this line, and what is the y-intercept of this line? A few more seconds, and we're gonna do that question together so everyone is clear on the steps. Okay, let's do the question together. Again, we're given an equation that's not on the slope-intercept form. So our job is to change this equation without changing the actual equation, the original equation. We're just gonna change the looks of it. So we need to use the proper steps to do that. 12x plus 8y equals to 48. Our job is to isolate the y by itself. I see 12x added, then subtract 12x from both sides. Okay, that's gone. We have 8y by itself. on one side, and then we have negative 12x plus 48. We just used to write the term with the variable first, and that's why I did write negative 12x plus 48 instead of 48 minus 12x. Okay, now I want to get rid of the 8. The 8 is multiplied times the y. Do the inverse, do the opposite, divide over 8. You have to do the same thing on the whole right-hand side. 8 over 8 is a 1 equals to negative 12 over 8x plus 48 over 8 is 6. I see even numbers on that fraction, then we're able to simplify it more. We can divide over 4 on the top and 4 on the bottom to simplify the fraction. Then it will be y equals to negative 12 over 4 is a negative 3. 8 divided by 4 is a 2, x plus 6, and this is the equation of the line. What would be the slope? Right away, that would be the slope, negative 3 over 2. Where would the line intersects the y-axis would be the point 0 and 6. The question is asking for the y-intercept, not the y-intercept point. So the answer would be 6 in this case. Then the right answer would be negative 3 over 2 for the slope and 6 for the b or the y-intercept. That's it. Questions? Anything that was confusing or not clear? Okay, let's go on to the next topic. We're still talking about the slope-intercept equation. This time, though, we have a graph. We're given a graph, and we're asked to write the equation just from that graph. How can we come up with the equation? Remember, the slope-intercept equation is really easy because all you need to figure out is the slope, y equals to m. You need to figure out m. X would be there, and then plus b. If you are able to figure out the m value and the b value from the graph, then put the equation together and you'll be able just to have your answer. That's it. The easiest part that you're able to figure out from the graph right away is the y-intercept. Where does the line intersects with the y-axis? So clear, this point. 0 and 8, and therefore b equals to 8. I'm done with one part of the equation. I need m. M is a slope, and the slope has a formula that we learned. M equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. I need 2 points. I have one of them. Just pick a random point on the line. Any point that you think is easy to work with, so clear on the line, you can pick. For this one, I picked 2 and 2. Label your coordinates so you're able to do the math correctly on the formula. I picked the 1, x1, y1, x2, and y2. Okay, m equals to y2 in this case is 2 minus, and then you have y1 is 8. On the bottom, you have 2 minus 0 equals 2. 2 minus 8 is negative 6. 2 minus 0 is itself 2. You can simplify negative 6 over 2 is negative 3. The slope is negative 3. Does it make sense? Yes, because the line goes downward. If you had a 3 as your answer and the line looks like that, you need to recalculate your work. Now we have m equals to negative 3, b equals to 8. Put them together in the equation. Y equals to negative 3x plus 8. That's the equation. That's it. Any questions? Anything that was not clear on how did I put the equation together? Okay, that's a good sign. Let's move on to a self-check question. The equation representing the graph line is, you have a graph, you have a linear function, linear equation, a line graphed in this graph, and you're asked to write out or choose the right equation. You can use the elimination method. You can look at the line going upward, downward, eliminate some slopes. If nothing works, everything may apply, then look at the y-intercept. And then you can go ahead and calculate the slope and so on. So I'm going to leave you with that graph on the screen to choose the right equation representing this line. Okay, I'm going to switch to the other screen. I hope everyone had the chance to find 2 points. And one of them, just to make it easy on us, would be the y-intercept. And then any random second point that's easy to find in the graph. Calculate the slope and choose your equation. And here is the question. What is the equation of this line? All of them had negative slopes, so that was not helpful to eliminate some answers, but the y-intercept can help us to eliminate some answers and don't get near to them because they are definitely will be wrong. And then choose the right answer from the ones left over from the given choices. If you wanted the graph to stay longer on the screen, I want to give you those points. The y-intercept was on the graph 0 and -5. Another point that you can choose is 5 and -9 if you still needed that information from the graph, but you could not get that from the graph yet. Okay, let's do the question together. The easiest thing I can figure out from the graph right away is the y-intercept point. The y-intercept point in this case is 0 and -5. That makes me eliminate this equation and this equation and actually this equation. So the only one, if you have a timed exam and you have to finish that question so quickly, you were able actually to find the equation without any slope calculations. I want to show you how to, or at least set up the formula, and you can finish up the rest of the calculations. And a second point I decided to go with, I thought it's easy, is 5 and -9. So I can actually trace to the point. So that was the y-intercept here. I can trace to the point how many rise and how many run. That will give you the slope, an easy way. Or you can do the m equals to y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Plug in the numbers, -9 plus 5 over 5 minus 0, and so on. The slope would be negative 4 over 5, and that matches the answer that we decided to go with. And that's it. Any questions? Okay, let's go to another way to look at the equation. Graph the line y equals to negative 3x plus 5. So this time we are not given the graph, it's the other way around. We're given the equation and you're asked to graph. In your exam, you'll be asked to pick the right graph. How would we come up with the graph that matches this equation? First thing I see, and they made it easy for me on that problem, that they put the equation on the slope-intercept form. That means I know a point on the line, and we know that we need at least 2 points. We need 2 points at least to connect to come up with the right line. One of the points I'm able to just see directly in this equation, 0 and 5. This is the first point. And this is the y-intercept point. So this point on my graph paper is here, 0 and 5. I need a second point. How can I come up with the second point? The second point has to fall on this line described in this equation. Well, I can't use the slope. Remember the rise and the run method? This slope is actually m, or slope, equals to rise over run. And it says that the slope is negative 3. I'm able actually to think about negative 3 in terms of a fraction, negative 3 over 1. I have a rise and have a run. Let's trace from this point to another point using this slope. And since this is the slope of the line, that will surely make us land on a point that falls on that line. Okay, so I'm starting from this point. The slope tells me to go down 3 units because it's negative 3 for the rise. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 points down. The run would be the horizontal trace, or the horizontal units I'm going to go, and it says 1. And since it's a positive 1, then go to the right 1 unit, and this is a second point. All you have to do then is just to connect the line. That's it. And you did graph the line using the equation. Questions on this? If you want to draw a more accurate line, or you're not satisfied with 2 points only, you can use the same thing to get another third point and connect all 3 points if you wish. And how you do that is you're going to start from this point and follow the rise and the run. Since the slope is negative 3, I can see that as 3 over negative 1 is the same. So go up 3 points, 3 units, 1, 2, 3, and negative 1 is 1 unit horizontally to the left. And that's another point. You can connect the 3 points. If you're okay with 2 points, then you can just do 2 points. Questions? Okay, let's look at a self-check. The graph that represents the linear equation y equals to negative 7, x plus 6 is. We have 3 graphs. Which one is the graph of this equation? You can go by the elimination method and look at the y-intercept. All of them, though, have the same y-intercept. Now, the secret here in the second point. Where would be the second point? And therefore, which line represents this equation? I'm going to leave that on the screen because my other screen, as you know, does not display the graphs. from the slope -7, you are able to eliminate a graph from these three. The negative slope means what? That the line goes upward or downward. Which one does not go downward? And you can just inspect two of the graphs instead of three. Okay, let me display the same question to have everyone submit their answers. And basically, it's going to ask you to pick either graph A, B, or C. I'll be so interested to see if anyone picks graph B. And I hope no one picks B, because B is obviously not true. And we're going to mention that later on. A or C is the right graph. Which one you found to be the right graph? If you follow the slope was a -7. -7 in terms of rise over run is -7/1. Which point, which second point you'll be landing on if you follow the slope? I'm gonna wait for a few seconds and then we can do the question together. And after that, we can just do a review, just a mixed review for the whole lesson, just to bring everything together. Okay, let's do the question together. Again, from the equation, we know that the y-intercept is 0 and 6. That was not helpful because all three graphs has the y-intercept 0 and 6. Another hint is the slope was negative. This line goes upwards. That means this line has a positive slope. This one definitely is not the right graph. We have to then choose between A and C. Okay, well, let's start from this point. That's a point on the graph, and try to use the slope. The slope is -7, so -7 is also the same as -7/1. The rise is -7, then go down 7 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Go to the right 1 unit. It does not land on the line. This graph is not correct. Of course, this graph is correct, but let's use the slope to confirm our answer. We need to go down 7 units, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1 unit to the right, correct. This is the line for this equation. Questions? Anything that you found confusing on this problem and I did not go through it? Okay, let's do a quick mixed review, 5 questions. Write the equation 8x plus 5y equals to 15 in slope-intercept form. To remind you, the slope-intercept form is the only equation we're going through in this webinar, y equals mx plus b. How can you change this question to this form? Write down the question, take the proper step, do the right math, and decide on the equation. And here is the question. How can you rewrite 8x plus 5y equals to 15 in slope-intercept form? If you have a question, I want to remind everyone, if you have just joined us, the questions can be typed in the questions box, and we'll be happy to answer it for you. Few more seconds and we can do the question together quickly. We did two problems of this kind, but we can just do it so quickly so everyone is clear. Okay, let's do the question together. So what's the question is basically asking us to do is to rearrange the equation. So I have 8x plus 5y equals to 15. I need to isolate the y, get rid of the 8x by subtracting 8x from both sides. That's gone to 0. 5y now by itself equals to negative 8x plus 15. I need to get rid of the 5. The 5 is multiplied, then do the opposite. Divide over 5 and divide over 5. 5 over 5 is a 1. Now I'm successful in isolating the y on the left-hand side. Now negative 8 over 5 is the same as negative 8 over 5 in fraction form. I'm not going to forget the x, plus 15 over 5 is 3. This is the right equation, and the only right equation from the given is A. A is the only right answer. Next, the slope and the y-intercept point of this line, y equals to negative 4. Y equals to negative 4. This is a special line. We did go through the special kind of lines, the horizontal and the vertical, in the early slides in this webinar. What is the slope of this line? I want to give you a hint because I want to just make it more clear. Y equals to negative 4 in slope-intercept form is really y equals to 0, x minus 4. Can you choose the right answer now? The slope and the y-intercept of this line is what? I'm going to put the question again for you to try it and submit your answers. I want to remind you that y equals to negative 4 is really y equals to 0, x minus 4. And if you graph the line, you will find out that this line is a horizontal line. Then, what would be the slope? What would be the y-intercept point? A few more seconds. We'll go over this question. This is one of the special kinds of the lines. One of them is the horizontal, one of them is the vertical. We're going to go over it again so everyone is clear. Okay, so again, y equals to 0, x minus 4. This is the slope-intercept form. I can just see that the slope is 0. So I'm going to choose between either B, or D. If I'm not able to figure out that this is the slope-intercept form of this given equation, I can do something else. I can think of y equals to negative 4, saying to us that for every point on the line, y always equals to negative 4. So here is negative 4. Any point on that line will equal to negative 4. So you have 1 and negative 4, 2 and negative 4, 3 and negative 4, 5 and negative 4. If you connect those dots, that will be a horizontal line. This is another way you can tell if it's a horizontal line or a vertical line. Now, from this line here, we know that this line intersects the y-axis in the point 0 and -4. So the answer would be D. D is the only correct answer. Questions on this? Okay, let's go to a second or third review question. What's the equation of the line in the graph? You have a graph, you have a straight line. What is the equation of this line? Is there any point or any information that you can right away see in the graph and that will help you to eliminate some answers, or no? I'm going to keep the graph for a while. If one of the equations for a straight line is y equals to mx plus b, which we know is the slope-intercept form, and we have all of these answers in slope-intercept form, then we need to check where does the line intersects the y-axis, and that can eliminate two answers. I know you cannot mark things on your screen, and I hope you do not. I'm going to mark that point on the screen. This is the one we're referring to as the y-intercept. Can you use the slope of each? Or maybe the easiest way is to find an easy point and trace to that point and see which slope will lead you to a second point on that line. I'm just giving you some time because I know the other screen does not have the graph. Which one is the right slope for this line? Okay, I'm going to change my screen. I think everyone had the time to use the graph. Which equation you think is the right equation for this line? I see good answers there. Okay. I appreciate if everyone can share their answers. Even if you think it's not the right answer, that's fine. You're participating. Learning is a process. You don't have to know everything from the beginning. This is the way we learn. We do mistakes and then we learn from them. Which line, which equation represents this line that was on the screen? A few more seconds. We'll go through the question. We're over the 1 hour, but I'm glad that everyone is participating and benefiting from this webinar. Okay, let's do the question together. Again, you are given a graph. You have to decide on the equation. Okay, the first point that makes us eliminate two answers is the y-intercept point, which is, if I'm going to write out the coordinates of that point, it's going to be 0 and -3. That means that the b is -3. Any positive 3's would be a wrong answer. Then we have to choose between b and d. Now, let's look at a point on that line. Since we have the graph, I can choose the point -4 and 6 and try to trace from this point to that point using rise and run. And we always go rise first and then run, not run and rise, and see how many units both directions will take us to go from this point to that point. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 9 units up, that means positive 9 for the rise. And then to the left, how many horizontal units? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that would be negative 4. So your slope for this line should be 9 over negative 4, or negative 9 over 4 is the same thing. So the only equation that is true would be D. It has the right slope and the right y-intercept. Questions on this problem? Okay, let's move on to the next review problem. What's the graph of the line x equals to 4? We don't see a y in this equation. This is a special equation. This is a special line. Is it a horizontal line or a vertical line to begin with? So we can eliminate some answers. X equals to 4, meaning every point on that line will have an x equals to 4, no matter what the y value is. Would that give you a horizontal or a vertical line? I'm going to keep that for a few seconds till you make your decision on which graph represents the given equation x equals to 4. Okay, I'm going to put up the question again, and hopefully everyone had the chance to use the graph and pick the answer. Is it A, B, or C? Were you able to eliminate a graph right from looking at the equation, or all three may apply? The previous question that we had in a special equation, we had the y equals to a number, and we said that was a horizontal line. When we have the opposite, x equals to a number, that would be a horizontal or a vertical line. Which graph is the correct graph? Graph A was a vertical line crossing the x-axis at 4. B was a horizontal line crossing the y-axis at 4. And C was a vertical line crossing the x-axis at -5. Which one is the right graph? Okay, let's do that together. Again, from the equation, it tells us that each point on that line has an x value of 4. So we have this point, for example, that's a 4. That point is, let's say, 5 and 4. That point will have 3 and 4. I'm sorry, it's going to be 4. 4 and 3. That is 4 and 5. The same x coordinate, 4 and -1. We have a 4 and -3. If you connect these, because all of them has 4 in the x coordinates, and that's why the equation tells us each x on each point is 4, then the line cannot be a horizontal line. It's a vertical line. Which one is the right one, though? Well, if each x is 4 for each point, the line should intersect the x-axis at 4. then this line is not correct. This line is the only one correct from the given graphs. It's a vertical line, does not have a slope, undefined, and it crosses the y-axis at 4 and 0. Last question, I promise. What's the y-intercept point of the line? Really easy. Given the equation, it is in slope-intercept form. What is the point of intersection between the line and the y-axis right from the equation? What would be the answer? I'm going to put the question right away because that is easy. Everyone should know that from the equation. It's there. What is the line of the intersection between the line and the y-axis? Few more seconds. It's really easy question. Okay, thank you. Okay, people still submitting their answers, which I appreciate. Can go ahead and submit your answers. Y equals to -7x minus 5. And that point should be intersection point between the line and the y-axis. Then what? What is the point? Okay, everyone did submit their answers, and yes, C is the only answer. C is the only answer that is correct. Okay. Anyone has a question? Anyone has a question on the topics that we did go through the slope-intercept form? If you have questions, you can type them in the questions box. The raise your hand feature is not available in all webinars, so the only way that you can ask a question is to type the questions in the box. We did go through lots of concepts regarding the slope-intercept form. We did know how to calculate the slope. We did know how to identify the slope and the y-intercept right from the equation if the equation is given in that form. We did associate graphs with equations and equations with graphs. We did go through special kinds of lines, horizontal and vertical. I need to say that I did make those graphs using this website. It's an open source graphing calculator. And if you have any questions, okay, that's a good sign. And if you still have questions after that webinar, you're able to email us. If you want to email the person that you usually email, or email me myself, my email address is on the webinar information on the email that you receive. So you can go ahead and email me anything that you did not get, or you want to double check on this webinar. I'll be happy to help. I want to thank everyone who attended, everyone who registered for the webinar but could not attend. There is a short survey. If you would like to leave your comments, your thoughts, your answers, that will help me personally to improve my webinars and also choose the right topics that you're looking for in the next webinars. I wish everyone good luck, and thanks again for your attention and attendance. Have a good day.